In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use the File Manager. The File Manager is one of the most helpful tools in the NLP suite as it allows us to perform lots of operations on folders with hundreds or thousands of files in them, and we can perform those operations on multiple folders simultaneously. So it's a very powerful tool, and in this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to utilize all the features in the tool. So to get there, we first need to locate Data and Files Handling Tools, and select this drop-down menu and scroll down to File Manager and click Run. This will open the File Manager for the File Manager GUI. And essentially, this is a pretty complicated looking, but I'm going to walk you through each part of it and break it down. So the way the input and output is configured is the same as other scripts, but a unique factor of the File Manager is that you can actually use a CSV file as your input. So within your input directory, those files can also be listed in a CSV file, and you can use the script and run it on a CSV file. The only note here is that when you input a CSV file, you need to make sure that you select the proper CSV field. So what this means is that if a CSV file has 3 columns, and column C is the one that you want this script to reference, you need to select the number 3 from this CSV field drop down here. So column A, B, C, D, E, F corresponds to CSV field 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So that's just something important to note if you want to use a CSV file here. So sort of the crux of the File Manager is that you have 7 operators. And I like to call these operators because these are the different things we can do to files. Then we have 6 criteria by which we can perform those operators. So I'm briefly going to go over each of the operators and what they do, and then I'll get into how you can perform a certain operation via certain criteria. So to start with the operators, we can start with list. So what list will do is if we have a folder of files, we can choose to list a certain variation of those files. Or if we have multiple folders and we want to look at their files, we can list them. And the criteria that I'll show you later will give you many different listing options. The second option is rename. And the rename function is super helpful as that can allow us to rename lots of files at once. And again, there are many criteria here that will allow us to sort of rename for a bunch of different reasons. Copy is also a very cool function. What that allows us to do is we can copy files from our input directory to our output directory. So essentially we can duplicate them. This is super helpful. Let's say you're working on a folder of files, but you want to make sure you have a backup. You can copy files so that you know you always have a backup. Move is fairly similar in that you can move files from your input directory to your output directory, and the move function allows you to not create an additional file but just move the original files. So that's super helpful if you're looking to sort of clean a folder out. The delete function the delete operation is one of the operations I actually use the most. I think this is super helpful if you're deleting duplicates or you want to delete articles from a specific publication, and there are a lot of different ways you'll use these criteria to delete files. Count, you can count files based on specific criteria. So let's say you wanted to count all of the docx files in a folder, you can do that. Split is also a cool function. What that does is we often have, and I'll show you later within the criteria, we have files that have a certain number of embedded items. And for example, the articles what I work with is newspaper articles, and they're split typically into 4 items. And each item is separated by an underscore. So what the split function allows us is it allows us to see what each item looks like when split apart, and it gives us an output file where each column is that isolates sort of one item within the file name, and that allows us to see, for example, how many articles we have from a certain year or from a certain publication. So then I'm going to get into these 6 criteria. And these 6 criteria are super important, and they are the way that you can sort of customize the operation that you want to perform. So it's important to note that each of these criteria, different ones are available for each operator. So if I select rename, all of the criteria that are available for renaming come up as white boxes and their text becomes bolded. And the ones that you cannot use become sort of a faded gray font and you cannot click on the box. So the way that this works is all 6 of these criteria, if they pop up for the operator you're using, work the same way for every single operator. So I'm going to go over each of these criteria once and show you, and then that way you'll know how to use them for each operator if they're available. So I'm going to start with by file type. What by file type allows us to do is we can perform an operation on a set of files based on what their file type is. So if we want to do that, we select this box for by file type, and then we can come over here and select the file type. So let's say we want to delete JPEGs or copy PDFs, we could do that here. It's also important to note that the star here indicates all files. So if we want to perform an operation on all file types, we can do that by pressing the star. The second operator, and let me click on, the second criteria, let me click on an operator that allows us to do that, is by creation and modification date and by author. Essentially what this will do is in your output file, it will list a new column that shows the creation and modification date. So that way you can reference when files were created and when they were modified. Additionally, you can see the name of the author in the output file, but this will only work for Windows Office files. So for example, an Excel file or a Word file will work here. The third criteria is by prefix value or by substring value. And essentially, if you want to use this criteria, you select either prefix value or by substring value. And when you select one of those, you need to enter the case in this box here. So let's say I wanted to use this criteria by substring value for articles that have the word York in it. I would have to enter the word York into this box here. Now the distinction between prefix value and substring value is that for articles with prefix value, where you're trying to use prefix value, essentially what that means is that needs to occur at the start of the article, at the start of the file name. However, substring value can be anywhere in the name. So, for example, if we were using the criteria by substring value for York, that would include the New York and also the Yorkville. So anywhere that you see the word York or the 4 letters York would be referenced by this criteria by substring value. The next criteria we have available to us is by number of embedded items. And what this is this is a super helpful criteria that allows us to perform an operation by the number of items that are in a file name. And I'll demonstrate what that means. So the files I work with are newspaper articles. And these newspaper articles have 4 or less items. And what those items are is a name of a publication, a date, a page number, and then a column number. And each of these items I have here are separated by an underscore. And so essentially we can perform an operation on certain articles by the number of items that it has. And the way that we do that is by selecting this. And then here, what I like to do is typically work with files or articles that have 4 or less items in it. And so what I'll do here is I'll try to perform, let's say I want to perform an operation on articles with greater than or equal to 5 items, and those items are separated by an underscore, as I showed you. So you always have to fill in this box here, as well as the number of items and the separator character that you are using in your files. So that's a super helpful criteria that I use all the time. The last criteria that we have available to us is by number of embedded characters. And essentially, if we use this criteria, we just need to denote the number of characters in this box that we're looking for. And so those are the 6 criteria by which you can perform the 7 operations. And then afterwards, we have what's called file name embeds date. What this does is it's only really available when listing files, but essentially it checks if the date is reported in the correct format of month, day, year. And that way, if the date is reported incorrectly, then in the output file, it will report a blank. The next thing we have here is probably the most important button that I'm going to show you how to use, and this is the Include Subdirectories button. And so what a subdirectory is I'll show you here, is in this folder called Demonstration, we have 5 files, and we also have a folder within it. So this folder within it will be considered a subdirectory. And I could have multiple subdirectories in this folder with multiple files within them. So the way that this button works is if I wanted to perform a specific operation that on the files in that folder, as well as the subdirectories within that folder and the files within those subdirectories, I would select this box for Include Subdirectories, and that would allow me to reference all the files in those folders. Finally, we want to make sure that these 2 boxes are checked, and then I will show you here a demonstration of how we can run this script. So right now my input directory has these 5 files. So let's say I just want to delete these 2 docx files. So the way that I go about doing that is I select the operation I want, delete, and I want to delete by file type, and I want to just delete those 2 docx files. And since I don't want to delete anything within that folder called new, I won't check the box for Include Subdirectories, and I will run this script. And every time you select the delete operator, it's going to ask you this, because these files that you delete aren't like other files on your computer. You can't go to the recycle bin and recover them. So I'm going to press that I want to continue, yes. And normally you can follow it in the command line. That happened very quickly because there's only 2 files. Okay, and then it will automatically open an Excel chart of the files that were deleted. Here we go. And there you go. So that's a short demonstration of how to use the file manager. And always remember that if you're in need of additional help, you can select one of the help buttons on the right or open the tips files.